So we're here today. This particular session is working with custom manure applicators. Our focus here today is to work as a panel discussion. You know, we're going to have a few short introductions here at the beginning, but then we really want to focus on questions from you. So I really hope you brought some questions with you and you won't be bashful. So I'll be encouraging folks to ask questions throughout the session. I think there's a couple good First of all, I'll say my name is John Lory. I'm with the University of Missouri in Extension and the Commercial Agriculture Program. I work on manure management issues, nutrient management issues. In terms of custom manure applicators, there's really two good reasons to have this group up in the front of the room. One is that as you look around the U.S., more and more manure is being applied by custom applicators. And so knowing how to work with a custom applicator, knowing the kinds of services, what they're expecting, that can be useful for you as you consider whether you should be working with a custom applicator. The other thing is custom applicators, by definition, spread a lot of manure. So they have a lot of knowledge that maybe some of us that do it as a hobby don't have. And so, they have some real experiences out there that maybe we can all benefit from. So there's really two levels that I think is great we have this panel here today. I'm going to quickly introduce the panel, and then we'll ask each of them to give a little introduction about what they do, where they work, and that sort of thing. So going from right to left, on the right side, we've got Kyle Kendrick. He's a farmer and custom applicator out of Palmyra, Missouri. Next we have Josh Lehenbauer, who's also a farmer and custom applicator out of Avaz, Missouri. Next we've got Kurt Beckman. Kurt Beckman is the ag liaison from MDNR and is here to help us maybe address some of the regulatory issues that might be around this topic. And then finally, but certainly not least, is Phillip Wise. He's a hog farmer, MPA board member, and also a custom applicator in north central Missouri. So we've got quite a bit of experience up here, quite a range as you look around the state. So what we'll do now is we'll give each of these folks a chance to say something briefly, and then we'll move on to questions. Thanks, Kyle.
Can everybody hear me? I am Kyle Kendrick with Kendrick Nutrient Management, as he said, from Palmyra, Missouri. I'm here, got a twin brother, Keaton, here sitting up front that work every day with, and then my dad back here as well. And we own and operate Kendrick Nutrient Management. Kendrick Nutrient Management is comprised of, we've got a tractor and tank wagon, a 7,300 gallon wagon, a couple of semi-tankers that we try to run as little as possible if that works out, just because it's not near as efficient as, say, drag hose. But then we also run two drag hose systems. Both of them are Dietrich toolbars, an 11 knife and a 12 knife. We typically can pump manure up to about 3 miles at this point. Future could be more, but that's where we're at now. We spread roughly 65, 70 million gallon a year, maybe a little bit more than that coming this next year. We've picked up a little bit of work. I don't know.
That's a great start.
Hi, I'm Josh Lehenbauer. My dad is up here up front. His name's Don, and we own and operate P.S.C.O. LLC out of Avaz, Missouri. And we dragline everything. We got 3 tankers that we can frac tank some, but like the Kendricks were saying, we try not to use those little as possible because it takes a lot of time, a lot of labor, and a lot of fuel. So we operate with 2 dragline systems. We can pump between 3 and 4 miles. We have 5 mainline pumps. We agitate with a vertical agitation pump, which is just 1 engine and 1 pump that we're sucking out of the barn with. We suck out of the barn with a 12-inch suction line, and we have about 6 or 8 outlets on our pump, our stir pump, and it vertically agitates the pit, so it cuts down on fuel. We don't have to have a lot of tractors driving around and running all the time. So we basically took 3 tractors and eliminated those and went to one main pump to agitate the pits with. We do pump a couple lagoons, but not too many. Most of it's all deep pit. I don't know. That's about it, really.
Good afternoon. My name is Kurt Beckman. As John said, I work for the Department of Natural Resources. I'm the ag liaison for the department, which basically in general, I'm the go-between kind of between the industry, you folks, and the permitting folks that we have at the department and regional offices. We do have regional offices, as most of you know, in Kansas City, Springfield, Poplar Bluff, Macon, and then Jefferson City. Generally, the permit writers and those folks are in the Jefferson City office, but the regional office folks are very important because they're out there doing the inspections and working with you on compliance assistance visits. So we've got some really great staff out there. As I said, I'm kind of the go-between. Today I'll just be here to answer any questions about any permitting questions or concerns that you want me to take back to the department. About myself, I'm from Osage County. I live in the small town of Loose Creek and grew up on a turkey farm, so somewhat familiar with nutrient management issues and work closely with the university and other folks. So.
Thank you. I'm Phillip Wise. I'm from northern Missouri, north central Missouri, just south of the Iowa line. We go under the name of Wise Enterprises. We are probably one of the, I would guess I'm a fairly small applicator compared to the other fellows here. We run strictly tankers. We don't run the drag hoses. We also operate under the name of Kiwi Applicators. And he said, how'd you get a name like that? Well, my son-in-law's from New Zealand, and there's 2 groups of people in this world that love to tell you where they're from. That's Texans and New Zealanders. So hence the name Kiwi Applicators. We run 2 tankers, standard equipment anymore. We were, and we run a 4-wheel drive Terrigator, tricycle gear, and we were, but we aren't right now, running Diller tankers, semi-tankers with 8-wheel drive man trucks. And the man trucks are former missile carriers, and those things worked out really well. Everybody likes to talk about their best year. I don't pump as many gallons as these guys do. You can't probably do that with the tankers. We run maybe 26 million gallons in a good year for us. Our customer base right now is primarily contract growers from Murphy Brown in North Missouri, because that's primarily all we have up in our area. On our tankers, we use a rolling coulter system that's built by Yetter and opens the groove, and we do about 90% of our application on upland grass, and we do use that coulter system or that rolling coulter system on that pasture. It does make a groove. We get good soil contact. We get it off the grass and into the ground, and I think that without doing just visually looking at the way the grass grows versus surface application, we get a lot more tonnage and a lot better growth there. I guess turn it over to whoever here.
All right. So with that, I guess my question is, from that introduction, does anybody have any follow-up questions specifically about the introduction, or do they want to follow up on any points from there? Or anyone have a question? If you don't ask a question, I'll just start asking the ones I'm interested in. So, all right. Well, I'll kick it off. What I'd like to do is have each of you guys talk a little bit about, what are some of the benefits of working with a custom applicator? What do you think you bring to the table that would make somebody think I'm better off with a custom applicator instead of working with their own equipment? So, I'll start.
Wonderful.
We'll give different folks a shot at going first each time, so we don't wear Kyle out on that.
In my opinion, I guess why I would say custom application makes sense for a lot of growers is simply efficiency. We already have a lot of the overhead built into our system. You don't have a tank sitting out on your farm not doing anything 10 months out of the year or even 11 months. We have a certain amount of expertise on it of getting stuff done. And I've been in the custom application business for 30-some years, not necessarily always manure, but I just think at some point you get a certain amount of expertise there that you can kind of pass on to the customer.
Obviously, I'll be pretty brief, but that's from the department standpoint. Custom applicators give us the assurance that they do that every day, and that we know that they follow that nutrient management plan as the permittee is required to do, and that they have the experience that it takes that we want them out there applying to agronomic rates and so on.
My opinion, for you guys as farmers to use a custom applicator is experience, expertise, speed. We're there and in and out of there fast. And we can probably, by the time you all as farmers buy all the equipment and all that. We've already got all the equipment and we're spreading it over a lot of gallons, so we can essentially pump it cheaper than you can pump it by having your own equipment, unless you go into custom applicating for your neighbors or if you have a lot to pump. And we're the expertise and knowledge that a custom applicator has is there's no end to it.
Tell them a little bit about insurance, Josh, and how many gallons a minute you can pump.
Right.
About pump intervals, kind of give an idea about the flow versus what we do out there.
Right. So as a custom applicator, we have to have a commercial style insurance. So if we have a spill, or say if we have an accident on the road with our hose cart out in front of your place, or run someone off the road, or we spill some manure over on the neighbors, we have insurance that will cover that. And commercial insurance is pretty expensive. So we have the farmer covered and our operation covered. And the hog house or whoever we're pumping for. So we're covered all around with the insurance. So if you're out there doing it yourself and you just have like a farm liability or something, and then you get a spill or run someone off the road, or a car hits you on the road, or whatever, you hit the neighbor's dog or whatever, there's all kinds of things that can happen out there whenever you're a custom applicator, because the neighbors and stuff are all mad at you all the time, and you catch all kinds of crap. And everyone's on you. They're out to get you. It's like, because they don't like you. They don't want you there. It stinks, so whatever happens, the insurance will take over and cover whatever happens.
Kyle?
A little bit to add to that one. If most of your farm liability insurance policies, if you read the policy, it has an express exemption to manure pumping. So if you have a farm liability policy, and even if you're pumping your own out of a hog house or a cow barn or dairy barn, most of those, if you read them, they have an express exemption to manure handling. So you got to watch that if you're doing your own out there and you think you're covered. You be sure to talk to your insurance people, because we did find that out.
Okay. Kyle?
I think these guys have covered the main points for using a custom applicator. Efficiency is huge. When guys out there with a drag hose, when you can go pump 1,500 gallon a minute plus all day long, versus somebody with their old say 3,000 gallon honey wagon, we can be a whole lot more efficient, get it done in a lot fewer days. A typical barn, you might only be there, just a couple of days, and then you're gone. That kind of helps out with some perspective, or some of the neighbors seeing, what you're doing. If you're out there with that honey wagon making it smell for 2 weeks, you might have some neighbors that are a little more upset with you than, say, a custom applicator coming in there and spreading in 2 days, minimizing that smell and that big perception that all those guys that are against us have towards whether it's the hog farmer or us as custom applicators. It just minimizes a lot of things, is a lot more efficient. They touched on the insurance deal. It's just the biggest thing is efficiency, and we can do it. We spread, like you said, we spread it over several more gallons, so that's the main reason.
Does anybody have a follow-up question to that? Or anybody have a follow-up question they want to ask the panel? Well, I definitely do, so want me to fire away? Okay, so I guess on the other side of it, if I'm sitting out there and I hire a custom applicator, I mean, how do I know where I end up on the list? And how much control do I have over when you're going to apply, and whether the conditions in the field I think are appropriate to apply, and I want this week, and will you come? How's that all work? How do we get that all worked out?
Well, the main answer to that would be weather. Not a one of us up here can predict the weather. We can't control what happens. Right now there's a lot of wet conditions. There's not a lot of pumping going on this time of year. That's a big thing there. From just our side of it, I don't know how some of these other guys do it, but where we're running 2 rigs, we cover. We're from Palmyra, Missouri, kind of a ways up northeast. We cover areas, 100 plus miles away from home, so we're covering a pretty large area. Now, if we go to moving equipment, say every other day or every 3 days, that cuts down on a lot of time that we could be pumping manure as well. So just from our experience, we try to coordinate. We've got a lot of repeat customers. We've got to get to the same guys every year. Now there comes a time when some of them are full that you got to do a little bit of adjusting and running back and forth. But us ourselves, we try to work in an area as much as possible. That way it minimizes our road time, cuts down on days that we're not pumping. I mean, those are technically days that we're not making money, so we don't like doing them either. But, as far as for you guys, if we can do them in an area, that cuts down on days that we're not pumping and lets us get a few more jobs done in a spring or fall.
So just we'll switch it up. I'm going to just keep switching around the order. So.
I thought I was going to be the last guy to talk, and I was... Really, he said pretty much everything that I would probably just emphasize the same effects. It's one other thing I might mention is distance is an enemy to the applicator. The further we have to go from the barn to the site of application, even the drag hose guys, which are limited by, I suppose, the length of their hose. But for myself, we tanker that stuff after a certain distance, and it just becomes quite inefficient. That doesn't really affect your standing in the line as far as who would do next or whatever. We also try to work, if we're in an area, we try to clear that area out as best we can before we try to go to somewhere else. Again, we're mostly working upland and quite a bit of sod. The weather's not as big a factor. It's a factor, but it's not like we're trying to work in bottoms and crop ground as much as some of these other fellows are.
Okay. Typically, what I do is I don't pump a lot of finishers. We pump a lot of sow barns, so it's a lot of gallons at one location. And what we typically do is before the season, we'll call around and figure out how full everyone is, and whoever's the fullest typically, or whoever has their crops out first, is where we go. Especially in the fall time, as soon as the combines hit the field, we're out there going. If we have to drive 40 miles away first thing, to get in the field, we'll do it, because we've got, as soon as the combines hit the field, we're out there doing it. And then we have a lot of repeat customers, so there's a couple guys that got 2 or 3 locations, so I'll try to get their locations done first. I don't want to go to their barn and then go to someone else's barn and come back to their barn just for the fact of biosecurity, spread of disease, PRRS, PEDs, all that. So, and we try to keep a road time down as far as driving back and forth from from one place all the way down to this, like the south border, from north to south. So we try to, figure out, get a plan before we actually start pumping. Know where you're going, know what you're doing, before you meet with the farmers before you're there to pump. Like if we have a new place that we're going to, I'll go there 2 or 3 weeks before, or if I know I got to pump it this spring, I'll go there right now and check out the lay of the land, figure out how I'm going to lay the hose out, what culverts we got to go through. You got to get with the county, get county permits to go underneath the culverts. State's the same way. Contact the state if you're going through culverts, around under bridges, over bridges. You don't want to surprise those people too much as far as that goes, because they'll get on you.
So if I could follow up on the next question, we'll have you go. So,
Did you have a question?
You're talking about South Park. What is your guys' biosecurity process?
okay. So the questions asked was, what is your biosecurity process? How do you handle biosecurity? Right.
So finishers aren't near as important, because they're rotating all those hogs through there. They got a fast turnover. A sow barn, the sows are going to be in there for years. They're going to be P8s, P10s before they're rotating. You don't want to go somewhere that, like, to a finisher that has PRRS and PEDs and every other disease known to pig, and then go to another place. So what we do is, I try not to pump the finishers first. I try to kind of hit those last. Like this spring, whenever we start, I'll try to do those last, okay? Because the sow barns, if they catch something through our equipment, it's our butt if they figure out that we drug it in there. So what we do is, between barns or jobs, we'll bring all of our equipment home, and it all get power washed, disinfected. The pickup trucks, the pickup trucks you can't get everything clean, but we clean the inside of the cab, scrub the floors. It looks like a brand new truck off the dealership lot up here. So all the floors and pedals and steering wheel, everything will get scrubbed and disinfected. Everything gets washed with hot water, and we have a few places that we go that they'll come out and they'll swab our equipment with like a Q-tip, and they'll send it into the lab and make sure that we don't have anything. So that's a lot of downtime for us sometimes, because they'll swab it, and then especially for checking for PEDs, they'll swab it, and it could be, whenever they started doing the test, it'd be like 72 hours before we got our stuff, before we could actually go to the next job. So it's a lot of downtime.
Kyle?
See, the other thing that's also important for us, if there is a disease present in one of these farrowing houses before we go there, or when we get there, we need to know that. So if you've got PRRS or you've got something at one of these houses, don't be afraid to tell the applicator, because the poor applicator is the guy that can take it everywhere. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you got it, we need to know. Okay, and what we'll do is we'll make sure that even if you don't normally require us to swab test, or the next person does, we will see that is done, so we don't take it with us when we go.
Right, and our personnel, all of our personnel's, go ahead.
I just wondering, can folks hear that in the back? Okay.
Yeah, so like I was saying, all of our personnel, their boots are all power washed, disinfected. We make sure that if it's cold outside, that their gloves are washed. We throw our hats away, all that stuff. Our clothes, make sure our clothes are washed between jobs, because even if you wash all the equipment and stuff, if you're personally not clean to go to the next job, you can carry it with your boots or your gloves, your hat, anything like that. Really anything. I could pull my cell phone out and transfer it with that. It's just it's a big deal, and it can cost the producer a lot of money if the custom applicator isn't careful.
Kyle?
Yeah, like Josh was saying, the biggest thing, just disinfecting, cleaning things up and disinfecting between jobs. I guess I would say, unlike these guys, we pump a lot of finished barns. We do a couple of of SAL units, some nurseries and stuff. We typically, we do a lot of stuff. Cargill buildings, I guess, are the ones that are our SAL units that we do. And visiting with a few of those guys, I mean, they like to see us down a day between, at least 24 hours between jobs, even after disinfecting. Most of the time, that's not too hard to do if we're moving from a little distance away, because you got so much equipment to move. I mean, it takes you a little bit of time to move anyway. But we as well, we try and power wash and disinfect real well before we go to any SAL units like that. It's a little more lax on, say, the finish side. We'll disinfect and wash the actual pumps that go, that touch the manure. It's awful dang hard to disinfect inside of a main pressure pump, a main line pump, or disinfect 3 miles of hose. There's absolutely no way, there's no way you can disinfect the inside of that hose. So, I mean, there's only so much we can do as applicators, from that standpoint. We use, just like a lot of you guys use in buildings, we use Synergize, try and dip our boots, like Don was saying here a minute ago. If you guys have some kind of a disease or a problem, before we get there or know it when we're there, please let us know. I mean, it makes our job a whole lot easier. I guess it doesn't make our job easier, because then we're going to go and disinfect a whole lot more. But it's just nice to know so that we can kind of adjust our schedule if we need to before we go to the next site.
We follow the same procedures as far as washing and disinfectant. I personally run a couple of isolation units for gilt development, for breeding, as a contract grower. So any vehicles, et cetera, that we use out in the field does not come on my farm once we've been out on a foreign farm. I don't go into my own barns if I've been out in the field or at a foreign site for at least 48 hours. And we've had 2 disease outbreaks in one of my barns due to sloppy biosecurity. It was totally outside of my control. I wasn't the one that broke it, but I'm the one that suffered for it. So we know how easy it is that that's going to happen.
Other questions? All right. Well, I was going to ask a question again related to pigs in the barn. Can you talk a little bit about how, in terms of ventilation, what's the grower have to do in terms of underpit barns, in terms of getting ready for you, dealing with ventilating and those type of things? What's the relationship there? How's that work?
We request nobody be in the barns. We're primarily pumping deep pit barns, and we don't want anybody in the barn while we're pumping. We drop the side curtains down and keep it plenty of cross ventilation. I do know of one grower up in the area that was pumping and shut the barns up that night, and one of the fans failed, and he killed about a quarter of the pigs in the barn. So I think it's a real problem. You really do have to kind of watch this.
I will say, actually, on the last question on this one, the Department of Natural Resources, as I said, we've got regional offices out there doing inspections, and they're also very cognizant of biosecurity issues. Usually they contact you well in advance. Generally, I think they only do one inspection, and they don't go to the next farm down the road necessarily, so they're aware of the situation. They'll contact you before. And usually the people that we are sending out there to do these type of inspections are either producers themselves or very familiar with your operations. So,
as far as the ventilation that the grower needs to worry about is, just make sure you have enough ventilation. And they make a gas meter. I don't know who makes it or exactly what it's called, but it's a gas meter that measures the gas in there. And I know if it gets above, I think it is 15 they go by, we'll stop agitating. Typically we don't have any trouble, especially with our vertical agitation, because we're basically sucking it in and blowing it straight down on a concrete floor. So it's not just blowing out there, or blowing up in the pit. It's blowing right down on the floor. It's like a sweeping action. It just sweeps the floor up. So we typically don't drop the curtains. We might increase the ventilation a little bit on the inside of the barns. But they always have a gas meter. Someone's always out there. If they're out there breeding or whatever they're checking or feeding or whatever, they have a gas meter on their neck, and that thing it's got a beeper on it. If it gets above, I think 10, it starts beeping, and then 15, I think it goes nuts really. But I'm not really sure who makes it, but it is out there.
A little bit about pit ventilation and when we start exiting, how low we get down.
Yeah. So the agitation, if the barn is completely full, we typically do not agitate until we get, a foot or two out, just to get a little bit more airspace in there. Because the more airspace that you have, it's just gives more room for the gases to go. And then especially if your pit fans are all blocked off on like a deep pit, if they're blocked off whenever you start pumping, you sure don't want to agitate, because then it has nowhere to go except for up and out the ventilation on the barn. So you just have to watch what you're doing and be really careful not to kill anything.
Like these guys have said, your main issue is on a pit building. The thing we tell guys, ventilation is technically not on us. We don't go into any buildings. I don't think, the majority of you guys don't even want us, going inside your building. You probably don't really want us stepping around the outside of your building because of some of the diseases that are going around now. But the main thing we tell guys is to turn all of your pit fans on, flip them off of automatic and turn them to manual. We're there, like I say, 2 or 3 days at the most on any of these barns. I say most of the time. Sometimes you could get a little bit longer, but turn all your pit fans on. If the building is too full, we're definitely not going to agitate either until we get down, get at least a good foot underneath the slats, get a good area there for those pit fans to pull some gases. The other thing we do, typically we don't have guys drop the curtains too much. We kind of leave it up to you all. We can suggest what we think, but a lot of time we're in the spring and fall, and the weather conditions may not be ideal to drop curtains. So if you do have bigger pigs, we'll tell you to flip on another fan or two, another ventilation fan. A lot of newer buildings are some tunnel barns. We ask guys just to put it in tunnel and flip another fan or two on there if it's all possible. Now I know there's some cases where we do have to pump, and there's smaller pigs in there. Do what you can there. We don't want you letting out all the heat that you're paying for and propane and everything, but we do ask you that you turn on all your pit fans, not just on automatic, but turn them all on manual. That way we know that you're getting a decent ventilation, and most of the time you're not going to have any problems as long as you have all those on. So that's the main thing. Just, for you guys, we do get to a few buildings that, there might be a couple of pit fans that aren't in working order. Those, if we're showing up there, we really need all those pit fans in working order just to, to cover you guys, cover us. That way we don't have an accident gassing pigs.
Okay, we've got about another 10 minutes or so. So if you've got a question, it's probably about time you might want to ask it. So
No.
the question is, repeat the question.
The question was, do we have producers shut off the heat in the buildings? Typically, we've never asked a guy to shut off the heat. We have run into a situation before where a guy kind of chewed us out because we really shouldn't have done it, but nobody was around. We called him and said, hey, we really need to pump today. We're going up against some weather. And he's like, well, walk in my barn. He kind of walked us through, turning some extra ventilation on. Well, I guess, it kind of was our fault. Once we ended there, we typically don't like shutting off ventilation as soon as we're done. It needs to run for, at least an hour or so after we're done to clear the gases that might be produced. But we kind of got chewed out from that guy because we forgot to turn them off once we were done. But at the same time, he never checked on it as well. So the next day we pumped there, and he wouldn't turn any ventilation on, and he did have some problems there. So it all can happen. and his biggest concern was, he was letting out a whole bunch of heat that he had just paid for. To me, we're only there a couple of days. It might cost you another, maybe a couple $100 at most in propane. Keep your heat on, get the ventilation on. It's going to save you a lot in the long run.
I want to add a little bit to that. The other thing with these sound bars, we've got it to the point now, what we do is we have a sign-in sheet. So when we go up for the pump, one of our group will go up, and the house has a sign-in sheet right there in the pass-through window, and we have to sign in, and we have to make sure that they know that we signed in. That way we don't surprise them and go up and start pumping, and they're not ready, because they set the ventilation inside. We don't go in the house. We don't want to be in the house. But we don't want to surprise these people. So they know when we're pumping, and they know when we leave. Okay, so we don't pump a house on these sow barns unless they know we're there and they're ready to handle that ventilation.
Also, whenever, like he was saying, if we sign into a sow barn, so they know that we're pumping. Typically, they'll have a radio. A lot of those big barns have two-way radios, like a handheld, and we'll take a handheld out there with us. So if they have ventilation problems or gas problems inside, or however, they can always get a hold of us, either through that, or, make sure they have we have your numbers and, all that, so we can, everyone can communicate,
You got any other questions? That was a good question. Sir?
He was talking about a vertical pump for in a pit barn for stirring. What are you referring to?
So the question is, give a little clarity about what you mean by a vertical pump.
So as far as the way that we agitate our barns, instead of having those 3-point PTO pumps that run by a tractor, like those green Huel pumps, they work fine, but those pumps are really inefficient and they burn a lot of fuel. And my experience with them is they're higher maintenance. They're just they do okay if you're a small guy, but whenever you're pumping a lot of manure, if you take like a mainline pump, high pressure pump, something that flows a lot of liquid, like we have a Cornell pump. It's a 10 NNT, and it'll pump around 8,000 gallons a minute. Well, like those green Huel pumps, they might pump. If you have a 8-inch, it might pump maybe 2,000 gallons a minute, something like that. So we're running, what we're doing is we're running hoses around the building, and we're sucking out of the building with a 12-inch line, just like we prime it up and pump it just like an irrigation pump. There's nothing force feeding our pumps, even our mainline pumps. We don't have anything really force feeding them. And then we run like 5- and 6-inch lines around the buildings, and we have junction boxes. And then we hook up a it's a 5-inch steel line with the elbow on it, and it just goes down in the pit all the way down the floor. And we don't even take the fans off. We just take and lift the fan up and shove them in. And sometimes I put up to 2 of them in there. I've put 3 of them in one spot before. If you have like a lot of solid buildup in one spot, you can put 2 or 3 of them in there, and it'll sweep the floor up. It's all about mass movement of liquid. So if you get a lot of flow through there, going, and there's different barns I set up different ways. We have one barn with a wall down the middle. It's I don't know, 160 feet wide and probably 700 feet long. And they put a wall all the way down the middle, a concrete wall with like 4x4 cutouts. So you can't really agitate it from the side because it'll push all the solids up against the wall, and then it'll just sit there. So what I did is I set my pumps up where it's drawing out of one end, and then run the lines all the way back around the other end, and then the whole building, it's kind of going in one direction. You don't really want to agitate against itself. So if you get it all flowing one direction, so say we're sending 3,000 gallons out to the field with 2 rigs, and then you're sucking another 8,000 gallons out with this thing and pumping it in the other side, you're having a lot of mass movement of manure going through there. It's churning it up, just bringing it all, sweeping the floor up.
Does anybody else want to comment about agitating? Well, you guys have something to say about that? Okay. Do we have in the back a question?
Yeah, if you got a barn that's crusting up on you and you're getting solids, and it, can you mechanically break that open and come back to help you next time? Or do you have to, basically pump it out, put some additives like critter, microbes or whatever in there to, get that pit?
So the question, just to repeat the question and correct me if I'm wrong, but your question has to do with if you have a crust on top of your manure, can they handle the crust in the plate as part of the agitation, or is that something that gets solved next time around?
Is that in a deep pit or a lagoon, or? It's a deep pit. As far as that goes, our vertical agitation, it'll break it up, but it'll take it some time to break it up, because you're pushing it in and it's all going in a circular motion, and it's all that liquid's coming up to the top. It's coming up to the top, moving solids up to the top. So it will, over time, it will break it up, unless it's just like a really, really thick crust. Then I might recommend something like the more than manure or something put in there to help break up the solids.
You want to talk about that?
I really not that much to
Do you have anything on that?
I mean, we have had a couple instances before where we've had that thick crust, or a kind of what I'd call a cakey manure. It seemed like didn't appear to be quite as liquid as what it should be. Don't know exactly what happened there. I mean, it was fine the time before when we pumped. We're still, to this day, trying to figure out exactly what caused it and fix it for the next time. But my opinion on that is, if you have that and you have some thick manure that is hard to pump or hard to get agitated, don't leave it for next time. I don't think it's going to get better. You need to do whatever you can to try and get that thick stuff out, and then hopefully the next time it's not, you don't have quite as thick a product.
So before I take the next question, I forgot to acknowledge Jerry, because Jerry's the one that really pulled all this together, and accordingly, he gets the last question.
If there is a spill, if you get it on the road, get it in a creek, or runs over on a neighbor's property or whatever, who's responsible? That's kind of a Kurt Beckman question.
I'll turn it over to him, but the thing I'm going to say is I'm going to be the first one to call DNR before a neighbor does. If that happens, I mean, as soon as I know about it, as soon as I find it, I mean, that's going to be the first one besides shutting pumps down, or if it's a spill on a roadway or with something with a tanker, you don't really have to shut pumps down. If you can shut it off some way, we try and do that, but the first thing I'm going to do is call DNR.
And I knew I wouldn't get through this without Jerry pointing out that DNR hasn't answered very many questions. So, there's different cases, and we understand that, sometime, somehow this is going to happen. And that's just something we're aware of, and we appreciate those applicators that are out there, and they call us right away, and we work with them. We send someone out from the regional office. And there's different cases. A lot of times, or generally, it's the permit holder that's responsible. Kind of depends on where they're taking it, how far away they are, or whatever. But generally, it's that permit holder that's responsible for keeping the records that they need for where it's going and who's applying it. There has been some cases where maybe the applicator and the permit holder or the owner will somewhat divvy it up. But our enforcement section generally handles that, and if it's referred to enforcement, then the landowner and the applicator have to figure out what went wrong and why. But we're aware of that. That can happen quite often. So. And
I think I can squeeze in one more quick question here. In my area, obviously, is mostly nutrient management, and this comes out of that. And I guess we'll start with Phil on this. I guess Philip. I guess my question is who decides rate, and how do you determine rate on your fields when you're applying?
Not everybody, but we do quite a bit of application on land that's not in a nutrient management plan. My own farms, we do have the nutrient management plan, and that's what we refer to as far as what our rates ought to be. And for those growers that have the barns, we obviously refer back to their program and try to comply with that. We usually don't go over the same fields every single year either. We try to break that up.
And obviously, the department is supportive of that nutrient management plan. That's really what our interest is when we issue that permit, is that the application is to agronomic rates and not above. There's been some interesting cases, but I won't get into that as far as applying recently in the news about that being considered a solid waste. So those issues are, but we issue the permit, and the nutrient management technical standard is there for that permittee to follow, and we encourage that.
Okay, we got a minute left, so we'll give each of these guys a short.
Yeah, I'd say they pretty much hit it. We go back on the farmer or the grower, and however much they want to, they always show us the fields, pump on this field, and a lot of these sow barns that we're doing, we're not pumping on anything that we don't have a manure management plan on, because we work out of some of these barns that we work with are out of Iowa, and they get in a lot of trouble if they can't show it as far as their records, where it went, and how much they put on, all that stuff. And they take, whenever we're pumping, we take a sample every day, so we know what we're pumping out.
I think Josh just kind of summed it up pretty well. Most of the time we just we rely on the farmer or the producer to kind of tell us what they want down, as far as the nutrient value to raise a corn crop. Yeah, we most all of us know what it's going to take to raise a corn crop, but we as well pull a sample at every one. No, when I pull that sample today, when I'm pumping today, I'm not going to have that analysis back for say a week or whatever, but we do have an idea what most of these barns are going to be. There's going to be some variance in those analysis. I tell people, give or take 10%, either way on those analysis. But we rely on the farmer to let us know what our rate is going to be. That's not ultimately a call that we should be making.
All right. Well, why don't we give this panel a big hand? I think they did a great job. I learned a lot. So.